If you're suffering from loads of stress, your threshold is low, you just can't cope with daily life very well, your relationships are a little bit off, you're struggling at work, there are just things that are not working for you in general. It might be worth considering and looking at the possibility of trauma being the reason. This podcast is going to dive into all the different signs that show up in your life on a regular basis, but also some really exciting ways in which you can heal and move through it and get to a place of complete healing.
You're listening to the Intuitive Mastery Podcast. Hi, I'm Kateconnolly, and with over 15 years of intuitive healing and teaching experience, I'm here to help you celebrate intuition and value authenticity to create a world where you have the freedom to live your best life. This podcast is here to teach you how to apply the principles of spirituality, healing, and mindset to have true and lasting joy, all from the inside out. This is the Intuitive Mastery Podcast.
Welcome to today's podcast. I'm excited to share with you, as always. And today I really wanted to dive into this concept of trauma. And even though trauma is not an exciting concept, it's not. But the healing of it really is, the fact that we feel so often like we're stuck in trauma and we can't get out of it, it kind of keeps us stuck in so many patterns that don't serve us. Now, trauma can come in a bunch of different packages and it can affect us in a bunch of different ways. But I basically just wanted to talk to you today about 5 ways that it kind of shows up in our life. So, 5 kind of signs and symptoms around what trauma looks like on a day-to-day basis. If it's still in your body, if it's still something that you haven't been able to release and heal yet, it's going to show up in certain ways on a daily basis. And let's be honest, most of us don't walk around going, oh, well, I had trauma as a child and that's why I yelled at you. We never do that to each other. Most of the time, we don't have that level of consciousness. But what we do know is that on a daily basis, we might be really cranky. We might find really small things really, really stressful. We might have these impacts in our lives that make us not function at our best. It keeps us away from the highest possible versions of ourselves. And most importantly, we are showing the world and ourselves that we have not cleared and are still living in a state of trauma on some level. So, like I said, trauma can come in multiple different ways. It doesn't have to be, a massive event that happened when you were a tiny child. It doesn't have to be the big divorce or the big thing. Even though those are massively tragic events and they will create a level of trauma, trauma has multiple different avenues and ways of showing up. It can show up through a parental neglect, and a neglect could just be not ever being present for that person. The level of ADD in the world is phenomenal at the moment, and it's happening more and more and more and more. And regardless of the etiology, as in where it comes from, regardless of that, it's still really obvious. And Gabor Mate has done a lot of work on this, and it feels very true to me, as I've seen in my practice as well, is that there's always a trauma basis to it. And trauma, like he said, and I agree, could just be my mother was literally never there for me. I had one particular client years ago, and she had significant trauma in her body. And she'd suffered from, I think it was a level of sexual abuse. And even though that was traumatic enough as it was, and it was really super traumatic for her, when I tuned into her, we'd done so much work on the sexual trauma that she'd pretty much healed from it. But what was left was actually the trauma left over by her mother. And it was simply a conversation where she'd gone to her mother, told her about the trauma, told her about the issue, and the mother said to her, "Are you sure?" And that sentence absolutely 100% created trauma in my client's body. And it was the culmination of many, many, many years of her mother not choosing to see her, and many, many years of there being some level of neglect there, which is just a really sad thing. So, as much as she really had that trauma in that very real sense, the thing that stayed with her, the thing that she couldn't let go of, was her mother not believing her. So I think there's a really big thing that we need to keep in mind here with trauma is that there is this perspective that trauma isn't real unless we've had a very massive incident. Um, I had I've had my fair share of trauma, I have to say, and it's been an enormous uh 10 years for me, I'd say, dealing with multiple different little traumas. And I remember at one stage my children were at risk by a family member, and DOCS was called. So DOCS is kind of like a community services child protection. And it was reported, not by me, but by somebody else. And I ended up getting a phone call from them saying, yes, this is tragic. Yes, there is abuse. Yes, there is bad. Yes, we need to do something about it. But we can't, because currently there are too many children having far worse trauma and abuse that we can't get to yours. But please, please keep reporting. Please keep putting information in. And it absolutely flabbergasted me and floored me, because how can you not take every level of child trauma as a serious matter? But the fact of the matter is that most of the mainstream don't see anything as particularly wrong unless it's extremely severe abuse. And they don't have the resources or the money to do anything about it. And so the amount of children, the amount of people that are constantly suffering from trauma that they cannot get out of is phenomenal. What happens to our adrenal glands as well when we feel stress is that we either have the capacity to move through something if our adrenals know, or if our body knows on some level that we have a stress that we can get out of that is very short-lived and we're going to move through. Our adrenals cope actually quite well. If, however, our body has no knowledge of when something is going to end, if it feels like this is never going to end, if it feels like a situation that you're stuck in and trapped in and can't get out of, that's when your adrenals pack it in. That's when your body starts to go into long-term adrenal exhaustion. This is when your body starts to go into shutdown. This is when you actually start to have really long-term signs of things like post-traumatic stress and trauma in your body. Now, I'm not a psychologist. I don't claim to be a psychologist. I'm just working on behavior and energies. My job here is to help people heal. And through doing that, through intuitive healing, through energetic healing, through spiritual tools. If you need to go and speak to someone about your trauma, please, please do so. Talk therapy is a very, very powerful modality. What I find in my practice and what I find with my clients is that in order to get into a lot of the really deep stuff and clear it, you need energy work as well. All right, so let's get started on some of the signs and symptoms to keep an eye out, just in case you're not sure, because a lot of people, like I said, haven't necessarily had a big major trauma, but their bodies are still in a state of trauma and they don't know why and they don't know what's going on. So if I give you some of these signs and symptoms and they really resonate with you, then it might be worth exploring doing a little bit of healing for yourself. The only way that we can fully heal these things is through our subconscious mind. We can't heal subconscious wounding from our conscious mind. I know a lot of people say that you can. I absolutely don't agree. I don't believe that if you've got subconscious belief systems playing out as a fairly constant kind of roadmap in your life, that's showing up in terms of dysfunctional relationships, inability to get good jobs, inability to hold health in your body. If all of those things are happening, or any of those things are happening, and there is a trauma basis to it, and there is a subconscious belief system playing out, I absolutely don't believe you can heal that through talking. Not fully. I think you can get to a place where it's manageable. I think you can get to a place where you can function much, much better. But a lot of the talk therapy even says this will never be gone. You'll only find a way to manage it. And in the world of energy and spiritual healing, I have to say we can 100% heal these things. This is 100% possible, but we must do it through the subconscious mind. So when you choose to go and get healing, bear in mind, talk therapy is fantastic, but clearing those subconscious energetic kind of belief systems in your body, in my opinion, is essential. So maybe try both, try one or the other and see which works for you. But in my family, I have given my kids and my husband and myself, we've done all of the above. We've done talk stuff, we've done energy work, we've done spiritual healing, and nothing compares to the energy and spiritual work. Like I said, talk therapy is good to bring in consciousness. Is it good to shift and heal stuff? It depends on the person, but if you're doing it purely on the conscious level, not so much. Okay, so the first symptom is lowered threshold of pain, lowered threshold of stress. And what I mean by that is it doesn't take very much to tip you over the edge. Now, that could just be a sign of long-term stress, but typically if it's long-term and you can't find a way to manage it, I'd suggest that you look at the possibility of trauma being the reason. All right. So, what that means is it'll show up, for example, when you're driving your car and someone cuts you off. And instead of going, oh, that was a bit rude, you like, lose your crap balls and you start yelling and screaming. You might swear a lot. You might, beep your horn. You might want to do road rage. You might want to get them back, whatever it is. But the reaction is massively disproportionate to the issue. You'll usually see it with parents with kids as well, parents who are just at the end of their tether. The child does just something really small and the parental response and reaction is quite enormous. I have been guilty of that, as I would imagine most parents have been, but it's such an important thing to remember that this can also be a trauma response where the parent hasn't integrated or healed a level of trauma, especially if it's ongoing and especially if it's something that you can't consciously control and look after. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is this constant feeling of being escalated in your body. Okay. It's not always conscious, it will always be there. Sometimes, because we're so used to feeling escalated, we don't realize what relaxed is. But for example, if you go on holidays and you spend 2 weeks away and your body is significantly less escalated, as in you feel significantly less stressed, if you feel significantly more calm, if you feel much less reactive, but it comes back as soon as there's a tiny stress, then also perhaps consider that trauma is a reason. And I'm not saying trauma is the reasons for all of this. That's absolutely not true. You have to tune into yourself and figure it out for yourself. But just ask the question and see whether it is coming up for you and is true for you. Okay, number three. There is a compound effect of you being impacted by trauma and you living in it. So it's not like you have a trauma or you have consistent trauma and then you get reactive for a while and it goes away. It's absolutely not true. What I find is that it gets worse and worse and worse and worse over time. So your impact may have been smaller, say 10 years ago, but as you're getting older, your capacity to deal with it gets less. Technically, theoretically, as adults, we are supposed to be evolving. We are supposed to be coming up with ways to become more conscious and more mature and have better ways to deal with things. And that isn't always true. We will often have situations where we actually regress and find it much, much, much more difficult to deal with smaller things. Now, there's going to be other factors, obviously. There's going to be factors of having more children, perhaps, having a bigger mortgage, perhaps, having a more stressful job, perhaps, having other things on your plate. Those are absolutely parts of it, right? But you also find people that have had the same job and the same number of kids and the same mortgage and the same car and the same life for 10 years and are still regressing. Perhaps look at trauma. Maybe there's a cause there. Okay. When we are dealing with other people, we have massive impacts on those other people, and we don't often realize it. So when we are getting upset about something, when we are speaking to someone about something, and we are in a state of trigger or trauma response, which is going to be often, especially if we're not conscious, the impact on other people is really massive. And it's unconscious on the behalf of the trauma-based person, but what we actually have to start recognizing and seeing is the impact on other people. So how do we know if we're impacting people badly? The proof is in the pudding. Do you have loving, connected relationships with everybody you know? Are you constantly in conflict and arguments with other people? Are you struggling to have a day, a week, a month of peace in your life and your family? Are you having a situation where people are not wanting to have anything to do with you anymore? Are you in a situation where people are struggling to spend time with you? Are you finding it really hard to stay at peace in your body where you can't agitate someone and make them really cranky? All of those are really big signs that there may be trauma in there and that you may need to heal it. Ask your family if you're not sure. Do you like spending time with me? Are you scared of me? Are you upset with my behavior? Do you enjoy hanging out? How do you feel when I come home? All of those questions are really powerful questions if you have the guts to ask them to the people that you live with, so you can actually start getting some feedback from them about how you impact them. And if your family feels safe enough, hopefully they'll tell you, and hopefully you'll be able to take that advice on board and start to recognize and see the patterns within yourself. If you already have a fairly happy and kind of conscious relationship with your kids or your partner or your family, they may tell you anyway. I know that especially all my kids actually are pretty amazing at saying, "Oi, mum, can you stop doing that?" Or, "Why have you done that?" Or, "Actually, that really hurt my feelings," or whatever it is. And I get caught pretty quickly. I do tend to kind of backtrack pretty quickly if I realize what I'm doing. But I do notice that not everybody can do that. I do notice that a lot of people will throw it back on that person, and make it all about the other person. And that kind of takes me into step 5, which is a lot of the time people in trauma, because they're energetically not sitting fully in their bodies, and because they're not really solid with their I am presence, which is, their sovereign self, who they are without all of the ego drama stories. Most of the time, they are going to be working from ego. And by that, I mean there's going to be blame on other people. There's going to be the poor me's. There's going to be this absolute lack of responsibility for showing up for themselves and lack of responsibility for what they're doing. These people will often go into shame spirals, but still blame everybody else around them for the situation. So ego basically is sitting out of the I am presence. If you think about Eckhart Tolle's work, where he talks about ego is the state of I am the best or I am the hardest done by, but there's never full responsibility. This is where trauma can place us as well. It doesn't mean that you're narcissistic. It doesn't mean that you have serious personality issues. It just might mean that you are suffering from trauma. It doesn't make the impact any less bad. It's really, really destructive if you are not conscious of it, and even if you are. So bearing in mind that every time we step out of our heart space, every time we step out of our authenticity, every time that we deal with somebody out of love, as in ego, we will hurt that person. I remember hearing from a psychotherapist a while ago, and it was beautiful advice. She was talking about the concept that we can either work from love or fear. And when we come from love, there is a level of honesty, integrity, and vulnerability in there that makes a reaction from the other person almost impossible. So if you are coming from that place, the other person is almost never going to be in reaction because they can feel you. They can actually feel your heart, and they can start to recognize and understand you. If you are, however, coming from ego on any level, if you are trying to create an outcome, if you are coming from fear, if you are coming from ego, if you're coming from a perceived hurt or whatever it might be, especially if you're coming from trauma, when you communicate and interact with your loved one, you will get a reaction. You will. Unless that other person is in such a high state of consciousness and love themselves that they are not impacted by it, it's almost always going to create a reaction in your loved one. So, yes, every time we respond and react, yes, that's on us. All right. If I'm super reactive, I need to look at myself, but we also need to take responsibility everywhere. So, if I'm the person creating the reaction in another person, we've all heard of gaslighting, right? Gaslighting is one of the most potent and destructive things that's ever existed, where you basically poke and poke and poke and poke and poke someone until they explode, which is another sign of trauma, by the way. But I just said there were 5. So there are many, many signs of trauma, but gaslighting is one of them. Not taking responsibility is one of them. And this creates such trauma in the other person, where you're basically transferring all of your pain and stress and trauma and ego onto that person, that it's a really big burden to bear, and it can be really, really tough to carry. So if you've got people reactive around you all the time and you're the one poking, you may need to look at yourself and go, where is this coming from? Right? Is this my stuff or is this their stuff? And if you are the poker, it's probably you. You will still need to work on yourself if you are reactive. Absolutely. But the stuff that you need to work on if you're reactive is going to be more around boundaries and around what you're allowing people to say to you, and around, whether you're allowing yourself to feel less than or to blame for things that really have nothing to do with you. And that becomes a sense of stepping more and more into your I am loving self as well, and not allowing people to walk all over you. And that's you stepping into your love space. And the person in trauma needs to step into their love space by recognizing what they're doing, taking responsibility for it, and doing something different. So this is kind of moving into where we go. So we've got the 5, or not the 5, 5 signs of trauma. This is actually about what can we do about it as well. All right. So just because we have these signs, just because we have these behavioral issues, does not mean that we are going to be like this forever. And it does not mean it's only ever going to get worse. Okay. I don't believe that. I've never believed that. I will never believe that. We can heal from anything if we choose to. All right. I mean, on a soul level. And we just have to give ourselves a few steps to work through, and then we can move and shift anything. All right. So the first step in healing is to take responsibility. Now, responsibility is not a self-bash. It's not a I've done this wrong. It's not a oh my goodness, what have I done? I just need to flagellate myself for the rest of my life. That is not what taking responsibility means. Taking responsibility is I see my life. I see what I'm doing. I don't like it. I own it. And now I'm going to choose to do something different. Okay. That's responsibility. That's responsibility in its fullness. Responsibility and then going into more wounding and heartache and self-bashing is a really dangerous place to be, but it is often one of the first steps of consciousness as well. So it's something that we need to really bear in mind, that if we do go from an unconscious place with these things and we choose to become conscious, we can sometimes get lost in this conscious incompetence part, which is, I know I'm doing really bad stuff and I can't fix it. Again, remembering our behavior is unconscious. We often can't change it with conscious choices. I mean, maybe we can over years and years and years and years of practice, but how long are our partners, lovers, friends, kids going to stick around for that? Like, probably not that long, because it's so traumatic. All right. But what if we can energetically shift this pretty quickly and get into a place of shifted behavior and energy, right? This is the power of energy and spiritual work. So taking responsibility without going into the blame spiral is absolutely necessary. All right. It empowers you to be able to do something different because you are recognizing that what you are doing isn't working, right? So responsibility is part of this awakening of, oh my goodness, I see it now. I see what's going on. I see that this doesn't work, right? Try and do that if you can, as much as you can. And I know how hard this is without the shame spiral. This is not about shame. This is not about shaming anybody, because shame stops us from healing, right? This is only about recognition. I recognize that I'm responsible, right? And this responsibility is actually going to empower me to make a change. And if I can feel empowered to make a change, then now I can make my life better. This is the power of it. All right. This is not about diving, delving, hurting, pain. Absolutely not. I think that's an absolute waste of time. If we need to feel our feelings around it, absolutely. But please remember, just as another concept to throw at you, emotions don't take that long to process. If you are processing something for more than 15 minutes, it's probably a story that you're making up and not the emotion itself. Okay. If you dive into pain for 3 days, it's stories that you're dealing with, not the actual emotion. If you can learn specific techniques to move the emotions through your body, it does not take that long. I have 2 particular techniques in my book, The Intuitive Heart Revolution. And there are loads of emotional techniques out there that you can try to bring your emotions through so that you don't have to hold on to them and it doesn't become this loop that you're constantly playing. Okay, the empowerment to be and do something different is a really beautiful second step in this process. So we've got responsibility, and then we've got empowerment and the choice to do something different. Okay, and it's a really awesome thing. But remember, when we choose to do something different, that's a conscious choice. But please remember, the trauma and the behavior and the beliefs are unconscious or subconscious. So in order to heal them, in my opinion, we have to go into a subconscious or unconscious therapy. Now, that can be through meditation. I do a lot of this with my intuitive mastery school. You can do it with hypnotherapy. You can do it with kinesiology. You can do it with theta healing. You can do it with all sorts of different modalities that work on the subconscious mind, not the conscious mind. And if you find someone that's adept enough to go deep enough to hit the recesses of the quantum field with you, and to shift the energy in the quantum field for you so that you can completely reset and completely change your energetic vibration around something, things can be healed instantaneously. It's a beautiful thing to see. I sent a loved one to a hypnotherapist friend of mine who had severe avoidance issues. And after one session, avoidance issues gone. Absolutely 100% gone. There's zero avoidance signs. I'm sorry, but that is not talk therapy. That is absolutely shifting the energy around avoidance. And it can happen instantaneously, and it's a very, very powerful thing. If it doesn't happen instantaneously, what you'll find is that there'll be some unconscious roadblocks that you have to work through as you go. So, yes, healing can happen instantaneously. Often it happens in stages. So, it's not always a one pill miraculous cure, but it's certainly very, very powerful. So, if you want to do some energy work and you need to have a few sessions around it, you need to start to become aware, or your practitioner needs to start to inform you of the unconscious roadblocks that are in the way between where you are and where you want to be. So if you are not well and truly on your way to being where you want to be or already there, you will have unconscious roadblocks in your way. Absolutely 100%. And your work, really, if you want to call it work, is to find out what they are and choose to heal them. So I'll give you an example. Trying to get for more followers on my Instagram. I'm going to say that. I'm going to use that as an example. If I want to get more followers on my Instagram and I'm doing everything that I can think of and I am really struggling and nothing seems to be working and I'm beating my head against a wall because I feel like I'm doing everything and nothing's working. And then I go and see my spiritual healer or my energetic healer or my hypnotherapist or my kinesiologist or whoever it is. And they say, hey, I can feel that you have real worthiness issues here. You have a block around worthiness. And because you have a block around worthiness, you are not going to get the Instagram followers because you don't actually believe that you're worthy of having the Instagram followers. So we do some energy work around worthiness. We completely heal. We go into the quantum field. We shift the vibration. We transmute it into something else. We transmute it into complete worthiness, right? The opposite. And we allow that energy to basically work through my body. And then voila, oh my goodness, my Instagram followers start to go up. Is that a miracle? Is that a coincidence? Is that science? Whatever you want to call it, it doesn't matter. For me, it's just real, right? The shifting of the energy is absolutely necessary for everything to align for you. You may find, excuse me. You may find that there are you may find when you go through this process that you have healing crises. Healing crises could be an illness. It could be hurting yourself. It could be an argument with a loved one. It could be something that's come from outside of you. So it could be a loss of a job. It could be, a tragedy striking somewhere. Ideally, it's not that, but it sometimes can be. And when we go through healing crises, we feel like everything that we're doing isn't working. But usually, I don't know why, this bit I don't know, is that it's usually a gift in very strange wrapping paper from the universe saying, hey, we're heading in the right direction. We're just going to let you unpack this for a while. All right. We're just going to let you heal. So I often get a bit sick when I've had a really big upgrade. I often go into a place of not having any clients and not being busy at all and having all of this stuff just shut down, like friends cancel events and everybody getting sick and me not having any clients. And it just becomes this really, it's almost like a ghost town. And I recognize it now mostly, not always, but mostly. I just have to breathe in those moments and go, oh, okay, maybe I'm having an upgrade. Maybe I'm going into my little cave and I am shifting into a new vibration. I've just had some pretty big stuff going on. I've just released some stuff. We've just had, different things going on where I've consciously decided to make a change and maybe my body's catching up. And sure enough, 3 to 5 days later, or however long it is, it's usually not that long, I come out the other side and then all of a sudden things start flowing again. And I get all of these clients coming in the door and everyone gets better and life goes back to normal and it feels good. But in those moments, we have huge doubts. I've had many doubts over the years, and people still come to me with doubts going, oh my goodness, I just did this amazing work, but then I just got really sick for 2 weeks. What's wrong? You could call it a healing crisis. You could call it ascension symptoms. You could call it whatever you want, but usually it's your body either purging old energy, releasing stuff that doesn't serve you, or basically going through an energetic upgrade so that you can actually embody in your physicality the energetic changes that you've created. So please don't despair if this happens to you. It's very, very normal. And it's a very regular part of healing when you do it on a deep subconscious level. Doesn't always happen that way. But if it does, please don't be worried because this is just a part of it. Okay, so we've got 5 signs of trauma. We've got 4 ways to heal or 4 steps to healing. Okay, so we've got responsibility. We've got choosing differently. We've got working through any unconscious roadblocks or unconscious beliefs as we go through. And then the final step is doing something different. So choosing the different path and actually walking it. If you go directly to choosing the different path without the first three, it's probably not going to work, right? You can try, and please tell me if you have managed to do that, pop it in the comments because I really want to know, and I really want to know what you did. What I found in my experience is that the first three must happen for permanent shifts to happen. All right. My family member with the avoidance issue, zero since then. And that was years ago. Absolutely zero, not once, never regressed, not once. All right. That is an instantaneous shift. That is a healing. That is what I love. This is what I'm here for. All right. This is what I want to show the world. We can do this, people. All right. We can shift big stuff and step into really amazing lives if we choose it. All right. If you would like to join me in my Intuitive Mastery School, where I teach you loads of different tools to do this and give you a community of beautiful people who are learning, growing, and shifting just like you are, please join me. I've got my links below. I have 3 different levels of membership. One is completely free, where you just get on and listen to stuff whenever you feel like it. I've got my Intuitive Mastery School, my mastery level, which is a weekly online meeting where we all just meet up, and it's a living workshop through different topics. We're at the moment we're doing childhood wounding. So we're working through core limiting beliefs, which is really fantastic. It's more shadow work, but it's really powerful. We have loads. We've got hundreds of different classes and meditations on there that you can come in and do your own healing at your own time as well. And then I've got an accelerated level, which is personalized one-on-one coaching with me, where I do channeled readings and meditations and healings for you to completely accelerate your process. If you want to join any of those, please click on the link and join us. I've also got my book, The Intuitive Heart Revolution, where you've got lots of information and lots of processes to work through, energetic processes, healing processes, ways to show and work through all the stuff that we've discussed today, if you want to do it on your own time. And it's a really powerful little book. But thank you very much for joining me today. I'm really glad to be here, and I will see you next time.